Chapter 8, The Planes of Correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. The principle of correspondence is the second Hermetic principle, and it talks about how if something is being expressed in one plane of existence, something similar must be expressed on the other realms of existence. This is the basis for pretty much all magic that I see. We create rituals and we do things in this physical world that have a spiritual, mental, or emotional correspondence that we wish to develop, an outcome that we wish to see, and it in turn builds up to developing something in this physical world. I also believe that correspondence is the main way that we can describe how divination works, how, regardless of what system you use, the outcome of your divination tools, whatever it is that you're seeing, relates to something that the spiritual world is trying to tell you, and it is up to us to decipher what these different omens mean to us specifically. This chapter discusses the three great planes of existence, being the physical world, the mental world, and the spiritual world. And it goes on to saying that there are 7 subplanes in each world, and further 7 subplanes for each subplane. So I'm going to describe these different planes as it's mentioned in the Kybalion and interpret them, but I'd encourage you to develop your own understanding as well as how you think it is meant to present itself to you. I think that beyond the physical plane, the mental and spiritual plane are more subjective, and what it describes here is a good structure to start with, but I know that there are different ways of categorizing these different planes of existence. Let's start with the physical plane. So the first 3 are the planes of matter A, B, and C. Plane of matter A consists of solid, liquids, and gases. That is, for the most part, everything that we're able to tangibly touch in this world. Plane of matter C consists of electricity and plasma. So an example of this would be lightning and neon or fluorescent lights. It is that gas in an excited state, or energy in that directed current. Plane of matter C is a bit ambiguous in its description, but my personal theory is that it's describing dark matter, something that science is still trying to figure out. The 4th plane of matter is called the etheric plane, or it just describes the idea of aether. There isn't too much description about it, but it is described as the intermediate between the first 3 planes of physical matter and the next 3 planes of energy. Plane of energy A is energy in forms that science has described and recognizes. The examples given in the book are heat, light, magnetism, electricity, attraction, which includes gravity, cohesion, and elemental affinity. That is, affinity between different periodic elements. Plane of energy B is energy that is generated by our thoughts. There are many studies that agree that the thoughts that we have can have an effect in the physical world and even on our immediate surroundings. I believe that there was even a study where people's thoughts affected the way that water freezes, where people transferred a particular thought process, an emotional energy into the water, and that affected the way the lattice froze. We also know that a person's aura or energy field changes along with the emotions that they're feeling. Plane of energy C is a bit ambiguous as well, but my personal theory is that it's trying to describe dark energy, sort of the counter to dark matter. In the book, there are described to be 7 minor mental planes. That is the mineral mind, the plant mind, the animal mind, and the human mind. And between each of these is an elemental mind, A, B, and C. So it's weird to think of the minerals or metals that exist as having a mind, but I think it's trying to describe the different affinities and repulsions that different minerals just happen to have. An example with this is that rocks have a certain hardness, and some rocks just dissolve in water. We see these as physical traits, but these rocks, these metals, are acting in accordance to their own virtues, and they're quantifiable. We know that different metals have melting points and boiling points, and they have different things that they're attracted to and different things that they don't like, in the same way that humans do and don't. The subplanes of the elemental minds, and in this one I'll talk about elemental mind A. This one describes interactions between minerals and plants. I think that you could describe this as the way that plants impose themselves in this physical earth. Plants have their own mindset, but they act in accordance to their own virtue. Like their roots dig into the ground searching for water, and their leaves grow upwards searching for sunlight. In a way, you could say the plant is thinking this, and it's thinking of what it needs to do for the best chances of survival and reproduction. But again, I don't think that it thinks in the same way that humans or animals do. They simply have instincts. Nobody is telling them to grow in a particular way. It's simply how they are, and they act in accordance to their own virtue. Elemental mind B is the interactions between animals and plants. So obviously things like the food chain and the biomes that animals live in. The animal mind is more complex than the plant mind in that animals move faster and they have instincts. They have certain programming that we can quantify and that we can understand in the same way that plants do, but there is a little more will involved. I don't think that animals have free will in the same sense that humans have, but their thought processes are complex enough for us to sympathize with them in a certain way. Elemental Mind C is the interaction between humans and animals, and that one is pretty straightforward. We eat animals, and sometimes we domesticate them. The last is the human mind, and I am a fan of the idea that in some way all humans are connected. Not necessarily our thought processes are connected, but by the virtue of being human, we have a species mind. Even though we have individual free will, I do think that there is some sort of meta-human mind that everybody is inherently connected to simply because they were born in a human body. And I think that this human mind, even though it has bad traits, is trying to lead us all towards the sustainability and survival of our species. The last plane is the spiritual plane, and I feel like this one is extremely subjective to each person. So map it out in whichever way you feel is right. However, what I think that we should be able to agree on is that the lower astral planes is considered more dense energy, while the upper astral is considered higher vibrational energy. And when I say dense, it does not necessarily mean bad. It just means a bit closer to our physical world, while the higher energy is more pure and defined in a particular way. In the book, it describes that beings such as descended masters might inhabit the lower spiritual plane, but that's only a relative term because they describe angels as being in a higher realm of existence. Again, I think this is incredibly relative to each person because I believe that demons inhabit the spiritual plane in some way too, but it's not in the way that we think, at least not in the way that pop culture is describing it to be. I think that the different stories that we tell, the different mythologies and religions that exist in the world are different ways to express how the spiritual plane is shaped, and it's up to us personally to decide on what we agree on, to test it, and to have faith in the ones that makes sense to us personally. Remember, the principle of correspondence applies on all levels of existence. So there are coincidences that occur in this physical world that are just that, mere coincidences. But with all the other principles combined, we can try to understand why these coincidences occur and if they are meant to mean something for us. If you see the same omens over and over again, or a strange pattern that seems to be correlated to the energy that you're putting out in the world, whether emotionally, spiritually, as part of your ceremonies or rituals, you know that all of these things are connected. There is a correspondence in your experience and what's going on in the spiritual world.